Coogs house. All right. It is admittedly early May, but Houston is the number one team on most people's way too early 2025-26 projections, and I still think they're underrated.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making first listen each and every day as an everydayer here at Locked On Cougs. You want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below the name of a coach or a teacher or just some leadership type of person that's been influential. We're talking about new assistant head coach Mike Ekanem in the second segment of this show. We'll talk some about Brett Yormark as the leader of the Big 12 in the third and final segment of the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and most places, FanDuel included, have Houston atop the country for 2025-26 in college basketball, and that's where I want to start. I want to talk about this because I think that Houston's got a handful of people to put them as number one. Most everyone's got them in their top five. A couple people have them down more like third, fourth, fifth. I didn't include everyone on my list here, but I did include people I have some respect for, and I still weirdly think a lot of this is kind of disrespect is hard when some people have you as number one team in America, but it's interesting to look at. So Andy Katz officially writes for the NCAA. He has Houston as a way too early number one team in America. Jeff Borzello at ESPN has Houston as the way too early number one team in America. James Fletcher of On3 has them as a way too early number one team in America. And Gary Parrish at CBS has them as the way too early number one team in America. John Fanta of Fox has Houston third. DeCourcy at Sporting News, CJ Moore at The Athletic all also have them in third. I brought this up because 24/7 put them in first, and I think what's interesting is seeing how many people are hedging their bets here, thinking they know some things about a lot of things. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of people, even John Fanta and CJ Moore, who, again, on my list of people I respect here, and I'm not going to say the names of people that maybe didn't, they both had Houston third, and a big part of why they had Houston third was they don't know what Milos Uzan is going to decide to do. They didn't see Houston finishing higher than third without Milos Uzan returning, where that's, splitting the point guard duty between Kingston and Pop Isaacs. I'm telling you right now, I think Pop's a lot more of a two guard with some one guard stretches, not a starting point guard as far as the pro level. I think that's kind of what he's going to be working on at Houston, if we're being frank. But I think it's interesting that there's all of this, discussion about what Houston can do and can't do and will do and won't do, as if they're not returning about half of their production from last year's team that was 65 seconds away from winning a national championship, and adding in the number one recruiting class in America on top of it all. I understand that there's some randomness to it, but that randomness also gave Houston the most difficult path in terms of KenPom and analytical models of the other teams' rankings, the most difficult path any team's ever had to get to the Final Four, and then to beat the best offense, a top whatever team all time in KenPom's analytical data and all that, right? To beat that team after being down for so much of the game in Duke in the Final Four, to then get to that title game, play another top 10 all-time team in terms of analytical data in the championship game, and have your shot to win that one. Yes, the Final Four offensive possessions did not go your way, and you ultimately lost by 2, but I'd say that all that points towards a program in a really good spot that you're then sprinkling the number one class in America on top of. I think, frankly, that you also see that if, again, Milos Uzan comes back, they have a team that built a lot like last year's team. You would still have 3 guards in Uzan, Pop Isaacs, and Emmanuel Sharp, who can all shoot over 40% from three over the course of a season. You only need one of them gets hot on any given night, as you saw throughout the year last year. They all averaged, I guess, Cryer averaged closer to 15 by the time the season was over, but they all averaged in double figures, and some nights they give you 20, some nights they give you 8, and that was just kind of where it settled in, you know. I think that that's an important part of what makes this team, even if it's Kingston Fleming running the starting point guard because Uzan does go pro. And I am very much the mindset that he's not, between how the last 2 games of last season ended, between the commentary from Sampson, how he always tells these guys to go take the opportunity to get evaluated, and frankly, between draft projections, by and large, don't have him as a first-round pick presently. I just think he's going to get some feedback, come back to Houston, and be a pro first-round kind of pick next year after a year much improved. We saw Sasser do that. We saw Shed do that. It's not uncommon. Anyway, with Uzan coming back, and I guess theoretically with Kingston, you have a team that's built very much like the same team from a year ago. Further, what you lose in Jawan Roberts at the power forward spot is the veteran leadership. But the offensive and defensive production, while there's the off-the-court intangibles that Roberts brings, the on-the-court production is very replaceable. And I say to say that it wasn't like he was a irreplaceable offensive force, and while he was a tremendous defensive player, you can find defense in a lot of places. Houston's bringing in a guy that, again, I've said this before a lot of times in the show, but if you could go pro at high school, Chris Cenac would probably just be going pro. Instead, he's coming to Houston, right? And Chris Cenac is 6'10". I saw one place list him at 6'11", but I think he's closer to 6'10". He does the ball handling stuff on the perimeter. Jump shot and free throws look clean. He's not the most elite outside shooter or anything like that at 6'10", but I don't think it's a form issue. I think it's just he's 6'10" and needs the reps issue. I don't know if we'll get those by the time he's done at Houston, right? But that's just to say that it wouldn't surprise me if he hit a couple over the course of the season. He dribble hands off well, sees the floor well, passing, is crazy athletic, good instincts. And then on defense, he gets after it. And he does need some of that, hard-nosed mentality that Houston breeds into people. Jarris Walker needed to be coached hard as well. You see a lot of people, these high-end recruits that pick Houston, Mercy Miller, Chase McCarty included, know what they're signing up for, right? That's, I think, what's impressive about Isaiah Harwell, Kingston Fleming, Chris Cenac, and Bryce Jackson is they know what they signed up for and coming to Houston and getting that coaching style. A lot of 5-stars will not pick that. These guys did. I think that's also the intention, choosing that, right? As opposed to, I'm not going to throw another program under the bus, but as opposed to choosing another program, right? I think it's important there. I think that the things that Cenac offers, though, that offensively he can do, defensively he's able to do, that Jawan Roberts struggled with at times, don't necessarily make up for the leadership that Jawan Roberts brought. That's not really possible. But it adds something to the on-the-floor stuff, and then you find that leadership part from a senior Emmanuel Sharp, right? Or from a veteran Sedlot, a veteran JoJo Tugler, a veteran Milos Uzan, right? Like, you bring in those guys to plug in the gaps there, fill in the gaps there. In that, I kind of think that guy is going to be Emmanuel, not just because the storybook aspect of the ball was in his hands last at the end of last season, and he becomes the leader of next season as they go and they seek to cut down nets in April, right? I also think that he was an important player as a redshirt freshman. He redshirted, if you remember, because he had the bad leg injury as a high school senior. He transferred, so he came to Houston mid-year to do his rehab at Houston his second half of the senior year. But his freshman year, he was the first guard off the bench that season, 2023 season, as the spring of 23. Then he started the last 2 seasons and was frankly a very important starter in both of those. He's most outstanding player of the Big 12 tournament last year, most outstanding player of their regional last year in Indy, and most outstanding player of the regional in Indy, which is where the next Final Four is when you go back to that whole storybook thing. He's familiar with the gym, let's say, right? And I look at that. I actually don't even know if it's the same gym, but how many gyms are in Indianapolis, right? Shots at Indy. I'm sure I'm going to get comments on that. But I say that to say that I think that he'll replace those parts of what Jawan Roberts did. Just like Roberts replaced those things that Shed did. Just like Shed replaced those parts that Sasser did, right? they find a guy to lead that because the culture is built and baked in at this point, right? But the perimeter stuff, the skills stuff, Cenac offers a whole bunch to this team. Plus, you're going to be looking at, Jacob McFarland. We talked when he came in about how versatile he was. Hadn't talked to us about Isaiah Harwell and the shooting he brings in off the bench, the offense, the scoring prowess he brings in. I think he's the first guard off the bench, but don't quote me on that. Mercy Miller in year 2. Kingston Fleming will rotate in this thing and make speed everything up into hyperdrive. That guy can fly. This team continues to impress. And I don't mean this to say Fanta or Moore or any of these other writers. I respect these guys. Why I hadn't said anyone's name that I don't, right? I think not having this team as a consensus across the board sweep of number 1 team overall in America, at least in a preseason kind of poll, is bonkers. I'm sure we'll talk at some point about how that could be the devil's curse, right? My locked on colleague Derek Johnson will tell you how Kansas hates actually being preseason way too early, number 1, because it seems to always be ahead of their worst years. Houston doesn't have that kind of luck or anything. It's bad luck hits Houston in different ways typically, but we'll talk about those things as the offseason rolls on and keeps going. 24/7, I guess, just ranked Houston as number 1 team going into next season as well. And so interesting to see that. One of the guys on the sideline for that number 1 team in America is going to be Mike Ekanem. Mike Ekanem comes to Houston from Oklahoma State most recently. He officially signed on the dotted line on Tuesday. I want to talk about him more in a second, but first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Upwork. Now, scaling your business requires the right expertise, right time. Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and much, much more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Gives you flexibility by connecting your business with top freelance talent across multiple industries, IT, AI, web development, tech, marketing, whatever. Well, you need extra hands for that project or a long-term partner. Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. It's got cost-effective growth instead of hiring full-time. Upwork offers affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business effectively. Visit Upwork.com right now. Post job for free. That's Upwork.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Parker locked on Coogs here as Houston adds Mike Ekanem to their coaching staff. Mike Ekanem comes to Houston most recently from the staff at Oklahoma State. I talked to the Locked On Oklahoma State guys and a couple other people online about him, and frankly, I thought it was fascinating that for a guy that bounces around so much in his career, you can't find anyone that has anything negative to say about him. And that's really, really rare in that industry in general. College coaching, you always ruffle someone's feathers at some point. But certainly for a guy that seems to be a constant chaser and climber, right? Now, I should stress that we're talking about this today because he officially and formally signed the dotted line on Tuesday. And after doing so, told the media that Houston was, quote, a dream job. Ekanem grew up in Houston, I believe in Alief, and ultimately ended up at Texas Lutheran, played a little overseas after that, and has kind of hit the States and climbed up the coaching ladder. He was in the Spurs and Silver Stars organization at the same time. He worked in the video department there. I believe that is where he and Sampson crossed paths the first time. Sampson likes to have some sort of a prior connection to guys that he's bringing in. That's typically why you see so much of his staff have connections to his past. But the deal here with San Antonio is that while he was in San Antonio, he was working for the Spurs, the Silver Stars, would also moonlight as a personal skills trainer for a bunch of kids in the greater San Antonio area, and then was so good at that they asked him to also work with a high-end elite AAU team on the side. He's gone from that into multiple different college institutions. He worked at Nevada and Arkansas with Musselman. He's worked at A&M with Buzz. He was at George Mason. Bounced around a lot, changed job titles a lot. The dude finds tough, hard-nosed coaches to work with, generally works with winning programs. Really, really impressive set of coaches he's worked for. He was at Memphis for a stint and actually carried over and was working with Tubby Smith there. For whatever you think about Memphis, Tubby's a guy that's hard not to like as far as coaching things goes, right? A lot of different roles here, but I think what's interesting to me is he was the director of player personnel for Arkansas. The director of player personnel is in charge of like formulating a roster in a modern sense. Some teams or some programs are calling it their GM. Lots of programs are kind of finding this professionalization of their job titles in modern college sports. But Ekanem was the director of player personnel at Arkansas for their Elite Eight run, coming off the back of the nation's #2 recruiting class in America. So he can clearly identify talent and be involved in putting together a championship caliber roster, a high-end caliber roster. He then went to the front row of the bench or the official sideline to do more of the coaching stuff. And he went to Sam Houston. They won 26 games in his season there, got pretty far in the NIT. Sam Houston didn't win their conference, didn't make the NCAA tournament, obviously, but got pretty far in the NIT while he was there. He then went to George Mason, where they went 20-12 for their best season since the magical Elite Eight run way back in 06. And then Oklahoma State, obviously they didn't win a whole lot of games in the Big 12 last year, but they're resetting and rebuilding that culture. And I can tell you, without leaking too many names here, they are upset he's leaving, but not upset with him. And by that I mean like they're happy for him, but they wish he was staying there in Stillwater. He has a family now, a couple kids, a wife. He's from Houston. It makes sense. He wants to come home. And I think that's what a Houstonian or a Houston Cougar fan like yourself can hold on to as far as him sitting tight here for a second, as opposed to other places. This is, as he mentioned, a dream job for an assistant coach. It's frankly a job that he knows everyone's going to get kind of promoted or have the chance to be promoted sometime whenever the reins get passed from Kelvin to Kellen, right? Sampson. It's in his hometown. It's a top-tier program. As far as his recruiting basis goes, wherever he's been, he's recruited the Bayou and the city of Houston. So, of course, being at the University of Houston means he's pretty familiar with all of that. Whether it's Louisiana Tech or wherever, he's done a great job of setting a tone as a tough-minded, hard-nosed guy coming from his own work ethic. And I am really, really excited about this. So much so I don't typically do multiple episodes about when we get assistant coaches. And I don't mean that to say the other assistant coaches they've hired haven't been important. Coordinators in football being a little bit different, I guess. This is a big deal for Houston. It's a big, big home run kind of hire. And I really am excited about it. I go back to that quote from an Oklahoma State person that said that Houston's just being selfish. They don't need any more good coaches. They've got them all already. But it feels like that is what's happening here. Is Houston's adding an up-and-coming kind of guy, very talented, hard-working guy. Silver Waves does a bunch of like ranking and award giving for whatever. They had him in their rising mid-major assistant coaches in all of college basketball lists in 2023. That was his time at George Mason. And I think that we're going to see come to fruition at Houston is, look, it's no secret. They lost a lot with Quantas White going out the door to go be the head coach at Louisiana, right? And you're not going to find someone rooting. I mean, we want to see Quantas do well there. Frankly, I kind of wish Houston would continue to schedule them at the start of the season in those non-conference games so we could see it up close and in person a little bit, right? Quantas was a gigantic part of what Houston's built. A gigantic part. But the guy's Louisiana native. It's a great opportunity. And frankly, don't be surprised if this thing turned around pretty quickly. They've already got some of the highest ranked recruits they've ever had in program history, doing great in the portal relative to what they're doing there. Locked On Sunbelt, actually, we have a Locked On channel for that conference. Schultze hosts that one. They've talked to Quantas on the show. Quantas excited to be there. It's a great, great vibe and energy. He left gigantic shoes. I'm not saying Ekanem is a Quantas White at this point. It's frankly hard to say that anyone is ever going to be Quantas White on day one. I do think, though, he's got a skill set and a mindset that will help move this program in a forward direction for a program that was already moving pretty quickly in the right direction. And so clearly very excited about it on my end. Again, I am a assistant high school coach as one of my day jobs. And I enjoy seeing these kinds of guys find their ways to success. And I think he's going to be, like I said, in Houston for a minute, but it's exciting to see him get that success here. Speaking of success, it would be hard to consider what Brett Yormark has done with the Big 12 anything short of a great success. But he got a contract extension that we got to talk about in just 1 second. But first, I mentioned at the top that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel's America's #1 Sportsbook, and the NBA playoffs are in full swing. Even if the Rockets are out, they're still in full swing. Every night, highlight performances. I mean, last night, Halliburton, what else could you be asked for, right? Major momentum shifts, can't miss moments. The NBA playoffs are drama like no other, and FanDuel make it easy to get in on the game before tip-off, live, whenever, mid-game, player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. $200 bonus bet if you first $5 bet hits. I'm too excited to not can't get the words right here. It's a great time to get over to FanDuel and get in on the action. It's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place that first $5 bet. If it hits, $200 back in bonus bets. That's $200 back in bonus bets. The first $5 bet hits. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official betting partner of the NBA. Parker Ranger, Locked On Cougs here. Talking about Brett Yormark, Commissioner of the Big 12, officially extended through 2030. Had to think some of the deal here is with the potential TV deals and all that unraveling around that exact same time. For what it's worth, if you didn't know, his deal was signed in 2022, set to expire in 2027. So this is formally a 3-year extension tagged onto the back end of that. Houston was not in this conference when that shift took place necessarily. Yormark came in for Bob Bowlesby in 2022, signed a new TV deal, added the 4 Western schools like within that first year or first 18 months. He also welcomed in the 3 American schools and BYU, and Houston being involved in that. It was hard to say that Yormark did anything short of welcoming Houston and the others with open arms, showing up to Houston basketball games, talking about how Houston is a great market for this conference and how he enjoys city-type markets. If you notice, he added Orlando, Cincinnati, Houston, Greater Phoenix, Salt Lake City. Like, he's looking to add these more metropolitan kind of areas. I don't think that that's any accident. We look at his background, the New York City thing, the Nets thing, etc., Rock Nation, right? All of that. But it's hard to knock him as being anything more than a great success for Houston as far as a conference commissioner goes. Obviously, some credit has to go to Bob Bowlesby for ultimately bringing Houston and those others in. Technically, I say that because I guess they were ushered in, like, when the first day Houston was in the Big 12 officially, like playing in the Big 12 was under Yormark. The deals had all been signed under Bowlesby, right? And that was before him. But that all could have fallen apart. Bowlesby went out the door, Texas and Oklahoma, and their big dollar signs and whatever left as well. And most people assumed this conference was going to fall apart. And I don't mean that to say that like adding Houston was the reason, but it's no secret that the 4 schools they added in that switch did make as much money as either school they left, all 4 put together, right? And things have grown. Houston's grown exponentially with the Big 12, right? But the big things that Yormark does was he made sure the conference didn't die, and it didn't just survive, it thrived. The Big 12 was continuing to grow and grow and grow. He got to the TV deal first, beat the Pac-12 with the punch, and watched that conference fall apart as he stole 4 of their schools out from under him. Stabilized the Big 12. That's a legacy as far as Brett Yormark goes, especially when people, like I said, assumed it would fall apart. And what's interesting is he's had this mantra the whole time about being open for business. He's been ready for this era of college sports that is all about business. It's very professional feeling. He comes from a pro sports and marketing background. Look, he's done things as forward thinking as discuss the idea of selling off the conference's name, right? Making it the All-State 12 or the Dr. Pepper 12 or the whatever 12 to try and, find ways to gain more dollars for the conference in that way. They've talked about private equity. They've talked about having multiple TV deals for different sports, basketball and football being separate big-time TV deals because of how big the conference is in terms of basketball, right? He's talked about having games in Mexico. I still think that's potentially about to happen in the next 18 months. We have some games being played in Mexico as a way to continue to market the league. He came from the outside of college sports, came into the Big 12 and continues to think outside the box and do things outside the box. And it's been fascinating as someone who fancies himself, again, one of my other day jobs, I teach history. Someone thinks a lot about the history of college sports, so things change a lot. Now, the only constant is that there's change, right? He's kind of been able to navigate that seamlessly. He's not talking about the old ways, the old days, et cetera, and how we got to get things back. And he's not on TV complaining about how this, then, the other is happening. It's all forward, right? And I think it's fascinating that as much as that's the case, he still has a lot left to do in the next 5 years of his term, of his contracted term. I'm assuming if things go well, he'll get another extension if he wants it. I'm assuming. But his biggest goal moving forward has to be to continue to secure financing to propel this conference to the top level of college sports. And, I think, and I'm sure you as a listener think, because you're a Houston Cougar fan, that the Big 12 is ahead of the ACC and solidly in third place in most categories as far as like viewership data and things like that. You also factor in the ACC has had some real serious scares with falling apart and all of that. The Big 12 is adding members, and the ACC kind of scaredly added Cal and Stanford when the Pac-12 fell apart because they needed to get in the game. SMU, they said, oh, yeah, I guess if you pay for yourself, you can join in on the party or whatever, right? The ACC kind of feels a lot less stable because the schools kind of want out. Further, that gigantic TV deal looming that's going to come around the 2030 mark when this contract ends, theoretically, if he wants to get himself extended, signing that before then would be important. That's something the ACC can't get in on because of their weird TV deal that goes for so long. They all signed for way too long a term once upon a time. And, it's popular to look at realignment. I'm not sure what between him saying that they're open for business and the constant conversations that sounds like that are happening. What seems like every school that wants to join the Power 4 Conference, he's like, let's talk for a second, right? Every school is unhappy in their Power 4 Conference. He says, well, let's talk for a second. He has these conversations, or some representative of the Big 12 seems to have these conversations all the time. Getting more schools in college football playoff. Can you get a second, a third school in that CFP? Getting the money, the respect, the exposure, et cetera. Diving into private equity, seeing what the best way for college sports program to do that will be. I tend to put that as the last possible option. If it's that or not having college sports, I guess that's one thing, but I kind of put that at the back of my own thing, but he's not me, right? And whatever the case may be, whatever he's going to get done, the biggest goal of the next 5 years is going to be getting that dollar amount closer to that $60 range, where the SEC school is getting, around $59 million per school right now based on payouts from different postseason deals. And the Big 10 is also right around 60. A full share in the Big 12 is going to be about 40. Houston's going to be getting that very soon. They've been at the less than that as they came out of a non-power conference, right? But even from 40 to 60 is a big gap. And so the next 5 years of Yormark is going to be, how does he continue to shrink that gap? And I'm telling you right now, with how Houston's basketball program, the energy and momentum Fritz has in the football program, with how things are going presently, the upward trajectory of Houston athletics, if you also find ways to, in a world of the house settlement happening, a world of NIL, and a world of all those things, find ways to get Houston closer to that $60 million range that SEC competitors in their own backyard have, suddenly things get expedited for Houston too. And going to be keeping an eye on that, obviously. Keep an eye on all kinds of things Houston Cougars and Big 12 here every day. So make sure you subscribe, hit the bell so we're live here each and every day here at Locked on Cougs. For a second listen, I've been recommending Locked on College Basketball as they hit the national level stories about all things college hoops. Again, thanks for listening to Locked on Cougs, being every day or here every single day. Locked on Cougs is the prime member of the Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.